That is what you bought when you retired in 2026 for $1.5 million. If you are between 45 and 65 and have been chasing that number as a finish line, you need to hear this before deciding when to stop working. 1.5 million sounds like a fortune, and statistically it must be, according to the Federal Reserve's Consumer Finance Survey. The median retirement savings of Americans aged 65 to 74 are about $200,000, which means that one of the largest 10 to 15% of us retirement savings lives on 1.5 M land. When you actually calculate how much this pile of money generates in real consumer income, the situation is much worse than the headline shows. Let me tell you what I mean. The 4% rule goes back to a financial advisor named William Bengen. In 1994, he published a paper in the Journal of Financial Planning that looked at decades of historical market data and concluded that withdrawing 4% of your savings in the first year and then adjusting for inflation each year should keep your money for about 30 years. 4% of the $1.5 million is $60,000 a year. Here's a pension check. In a recent interview, Mr. Bengen himself actually pushed that number up, meaning that interest rates of 4.5% or more would normally remain unchanged. However, this is troubling because Morningstar's Retirement Income Status Report has been moving in the opposite direction, with the 2023 version recommending a safe initial withdrawal rate of about 4%, which will be reduced to 0.3 and 0.7 in the 2024 update. At 3.7%, the annual output of 1.5 million years is about $5,500. Wade Pfau, a prominent retired fellow at the American College of Financial Services, believes current valuations and bond yields could be lower, close to 3%, which would bring your annual income to $45000, dependi ng on which expert you trust. Your 1.5 million people are worth between $4,500 and $60,000 a year before taxes. And we haven't even talked about what the government is taking. Social Security is not what you think of as relief, but you may be thinking, okay, but I'm getting Social Security too. Let's be honest about what this adds to the equation. By the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, the average monthly Social Security retirement benefit was about $190.76, or about $237,700 a year. In 2025, the maximum benefit for full retirement age will be around $418 a month, but few will reach that limit because you must earn at or above the maximum taxable level for 35 consecutive years. For couples with jobs on both sides, comprehensive Social Security averages about 47,000 pieces of land a year. That is how it started. A couple with 1.5 million savings and 4% of total income, combined with average Social Security, is expected to have about 170,000 people a year before tax, while a person in the same position earns close to 8,037,700. Good, until you remember two things. First, all of this is pre-tax money, because traditional 401 withdrawals are taxed as ordinary income, and up to 8 to 5% of Social Security benefits can also be taxed on your combined income. Second, to make matters worse, the Social Security trustees themselves predict that the OAZ trust will run out around 2033, after which benefits may fall to about 7 to 7, minus 7 to 9% of the current planned amount, without legislative action. If you are 55 now, retirement can be a problem. Medical cliff. This is where the reality has become truly grim. Fidelity's 2024 retiree healthcare estimate found that 65-year-olds who retire in 202 the 4th of May need $165,000 to pay for healthcare during retirement. That figure is per capita, meaning a couple's income is about $330,000. Emphasis this, because more than 20% of your 1.5 million people received healthcare support before you spend $1 on something else. Medicare won't let the problem go away. Standard Medicare Part B premiums in 2025 were $185 a month, up from $174.70 in 2024, driven up by high-income retirees, hit by IRMA surcharges. Historically, healthcare inflation has been about twice the general rate, and long-term care, which Medicare largely does not cover. According to the Genworth Nursing Cost Survey, the median cost of a private house in a nursing home is about 116,800 yuan per year. The cost of assisted living is about 664,200 yuan per year, and the cost of a family health assistant working 4.4 hours a week is about 75,500 yuan. If your spouse has lived in a nursing home for 3 years, that is $350,000. It disappeared. The magic numbers have changed. That is why the so-called retirement magic numbers keep climbing. Northwestern Mutual's 2024 Planning and Progress study found that Americans now believe they need $16.4 billion to retire comfortably, marking a 15% jump from $1.77 billion the previous year, and 53% from $951,000 in 2020. In just 4 years, the number of Americans who think they need to retire has increased by more than half. The same study found that Americans actually saved an average of $88,400 for retirement, leaving a gap between what people think they need and the roughly $1.37 billion they have saved. If you are sitting at $1.5 million, you've cleaned up a bar that has barely been cleaned. But the bar itself has moved, and for most math workers, the number of retirements that used to feel comfortable now feels like a minimum. Where you live has changed everything. Another thing no one is telling you is that 1.5 million zip codes are not the same, or even close. A widely cited 2024 Go Banking Rates analysis estimated that 1.5 million people in California lived about 22 years, compared with about 52 years in Mississippi. These numbers depend heavily on methodology and assumptions, so they are seen as illustrative rather than evangelical, but the fundamentals are valid. According to the Cost of Living Index of the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, the states with the most expensive retirees tend to be concentrated in Hawaii, California, Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey, while the cheapest states are Mississippi, Oklahoma, Kansas, Alabama, and West Virginia. 60,000 people a year feel nervous in San Diego and truly comfortable in Tulsa. That is why so many retirees are moving, not for lifestyle choices, but for math. They didn't put the risks on the brochures. Before we end, there are 2 more things you need to know. Longevity comes first. According to the Association of Actuaries, a 65-year-old couple is about 50% more likely to live past 90, meaning more than 25 years of retirement. The 4% rule was originally designed for a 30-year period, so retiring at 62 instead of 65 would directly erode the buffer. The risk of the return sequence is second, which is a sequence that quietly destroys the portfolio. If the market falls 30% in the first 2 years of your retirement, and you are divesting, your portfolio could suffer permanent damage, even if the market recovers later. Retirees who stopped working in 2008 learned the hard way, as did those who retired into the bear market of 2022, when the combined performance of stocks and bonds was the worst in decades, with inflation peaking at 9% in June and 1 in 10. Since then, the market has recovered. The S&P 500 closed up about 23% in 2024 and continued to climb in 2025, but the recovery did not offset the impact of previous losses on actively shrinking retirement portfolios. Is 1.5 million enough? Here are honest answers, depending on the circumstances. A couple who directly own their own housing, have low living costs, are healthy and close to the average Social Security level, and more than 1.5 million, Social Security, can absolutely support the upper middle class lifestyle for a long time. A person living in a cost-effective coastal state still has a 6.5% or 7% mortgage, and health events, far from long-term care needs, will find that the same 1.5 million people feel much more important than the numbers suggest. Christine Benz, head of personal finance at Morningstar, has been saying for years, that the 4% guidelines are a starting point, not a rule. The same logic applies to 1.5 million people, which is the beginning, not the end, of the conversation. The grim reality of 2026 is here. $1.5 million puts you ahead of almost every other American depositor, generating about $4,500 to $60,000 a year in real income before taxes. When you add Social Security, this money can provide a truly comfortable retirement for most people in most places, but it is not the infinite buffer implied by the size of the number, because healthcare alone can account for a fifth, long-term care can account for another chunk. And where you live and how long you live, relative to how long the market retires, are as important as the size of the pile of money itself. The numbers on the statement are not the answer. Planning around numbers is the answer. And if you are 45 to 65 now, the most valuable thing you can do is stop staring at totals and start testing the results they actually produce year after year. In your actual planned life point, 1.5 million in 2026 is a lot of money. It is just not as much money as it sounds.